Oh, Christ is born. Welcome to St. Cyril Methodius Orthodox Church. I'm the pastor, Father Gregory, and it is a very nice, it's a cold day here in Mad City, in Madison, Wisconsin, and but I'm glad that you're taking a moment to spend some time with us. It's about 8 o'clock, and we'll have liturgy starting at about 9:30, so that's about 90 minutes from now. So hopefully you'll be able to join us, if not here in person at St. Cyril Methodius, then hopefully online, either on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. You may have noticed, if you've been following these for a while, that I change the topic line from later today to doing these things. These little talks, they've really more and more taken on the character of short adult ed classes or catecheses. So I thought, change the title. I'll still let you know what's going on later in the day, but I thought this might help people focus a little bit more on what we're doing. And I'll try to include a little tagline today, for example, bad social science and bad morality. And what I mean by that is, well, let me step back. I'm a social scientist by profession. My doctorate's in personality theory and religion, which makes me a rather eccentric social scientist, to be sure. But one of the things that I have noticed, and it's become much more prominent these last few days with everything that's going on in the nation, is that often people will present social scientific data as a cover for making a moral argument. And this is really not helpful. For example, there was recently a study published by The Economist, and I posted it on my Facebook page, where they talked about the percentage of Republicans who approved of the storming of the U.S. Capitol. The thing is, as a social scientist, I look at that data and a couple things come quickly to mind. First of all, I need to know who was being asked, what was the questions, so some of those very immediate parameters. How well does the population surveyed, how well does the population that's been surveyed represent the broader nation, and then the subgroups of Republican, Democrat, Independent? These are all questions that you just need to answer. The other thing, though, is that things like self-reporting surveys are notoriously unreliable, because there's questions with how there's a matter of how the question is constructed, how people understand the question, and you really don't have access to that when you're asking people to rate an event on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever it is. So there are a lot of problems with the data. And of course, what I think about something like the storming of the U.S. Capitol the day it happens or 2 days after it happens is very likely going to be something very different from how I think, say, in a week or 10 days. So, at the best, this kind of data is a very narrow but very ambiguous snapshot of what people are thinking and feeling. And these little snapshots, they have some value, to be sure, but only if you remember what it is they are and aren't doing. And so So to go back to my point, though, what happens is we a lot of times use this data to make a moral argument. We disapprove of what happened at the U.S. Capitol, fair enough, by the way, and we blame Republicans for this happening. Well, that second one it's defensible, but I think dubious, at least in broad strokes. So what ends up happening, though, is that we cover our moral argument with the patina of scientific objectivity. We do this, I think, for a number of reasons. Primarily that we have lost the ability to engage in sustained moral reasoning. Many of us just simply equate morality with what we feel, or those things at which we approve of. So if I approve of something, obviously it's good because I'm a good person. This is at a minimum, this is really a very unsophisticated, very ill-informed way to make a moral decision. At its worst, it's just narcissistic. It's just very self-centered. So we have to use the social sciences, to be sure, because they provide a lot of helpful information, but we have to understand the limits. And surprisingly, social scientists are not always the best people to go to in understanding the limits of their data. And the reason is because social scientists, while they might be trained in research methodologies and statistical analysis, are very rarely trained in things like epistemology or the philosophy of science. So they use a tool without necessarily being as knowledgeable as one would hope about the limitations of that tool, and certainly frequently have no knowledge about how the tool they're using relates to other disciplines, for example, ethics or morality. So what do we do? Well, like I said, make use of social science data, to be sure, but it always, I think, needs to be checked against what we know from the Christian moral tradition. At least that's what we should do if we're Orthodox Christians. It's like, well, the data says X, Y, and Z, or excuse me, the data says X, Y, and Z. How's that compared to the tradition? Which, of course, though, means that we need to understand the moral tradition of the church, and that is really the second problem. Most of us are not really aware of, not conversant in the moral tradition. Take, for example, a lot of things that we're seeing floating around now about our political situation. A lot of people are unhappy about the election. Fair enough. Many people think that it was the result of fraud. Somewhat dubious, it's just that's an argument that really hasn't been made as clearly, I think, as it could be. But regardless, they are not happy with the outcome of the election, and so they want to make their discontent known, which is their right and really their obligation. But along the way, people are deciding, well, if I get to make this, not just a peaceful protest, not just write op-ed columns, but I get to go to Washington, D.C. carrying weapons and maybe threatening violence or actually engaging in violence. This is a deviation from the moral tradition of the church, and ironically, it is the adoption of the same sort of utilitarianism that causes us to misuse social scientific data. In fact, while we do have a right to protest and to seek redress from the government, we don't have a right to engage in violence, even if the election was fraudulent, even if the election was stolen. That doesn't justify the use of armed force, and justify the use of violence. Civil disobedience, absolutely. Protest, get arrested, go to jail. That's great. But please, if you do that, don't whinge, don't whine that you're being mistreated, because of course that's the whole point of civil disobedience, is to shame the government into changing its policy through showing the broader community how unjust those are by your willingness to accept the penalty. So anyway, that's kind of rambly because I'm a little tired this morning. Anyway, we have liturgy now in about an hour and 15 minutes. Like I said, 9:30. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. If you do join us online, give us a little heart or a thumbs up, make a comment, make a prayer request, just anything so we know you're there. It's always good to have you with us, whether in the church on Sunday morning or online. So I'll see you in about an hour and 20 minutes. So God bless everyone. Christ is born, and bye-bye.